Hello. Good morning to most. Good afternoon to others. Good evening to the viewing audience across the pond. I am your host, Jason Miles, here for another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. We are doing a special interview that I didn't want to pre-record, but I wanted to do it for you live. As Ashley and I spoke a few months back, I think people were a little upset they didn't get a chance to interact in the conversation. So here we are, live and direct. Before I bring Ashley in, I just wanted to remind you that kayfabe, as well as all of the other video essays we've done over the past few years, are live on Means TV. If you're not a member of Means and would like to check out kayfabe as well as all the other amazing left content on Means, you can use discount code This is Revolution to receive a 20% discount. Let me put it on the screen so you can see it, because it's all one word, all in caps. This is Revolution, right there on the bottom of the screen. Receive a 20% discount. You can watch episode 1 of Kayfabe. I'm really proud of it. I want you guys to check it out. We're going to talk about that another time. Tonight, or today, or this afternoon, depending on where you are and where you will be listening to this later, we're going to talk about dark woke. The term woke has evolved from its original meaning within the Black community, signifying awareness of hidden social injustices, to a broader, often pejorative reference to progressive politics. In recent discourse, a new term, dark woke, has emerged, suggesting a shift in liberal strategies. This concept advocates for liberals to adopt a more assertive and unapologetic approach, countering right-wing rhetoric. I can't say that 3 times fast, and neither can you. Right-wing rhetoric with equal fervor. Proponents argue that by embracing dark woke, liberals can effectively challenge conservative narratives and reclaim political ground. However, critics caution that this approach may mirror the very tactics it seeks to oppose, potentially undermining the principles of empathy and inclusivity central to progressive movements. Recently, my guest, Ashley Frawley, wrote an article on dark woke, as she is the new editor of Compact magazine. The link to that article is in the description of this show. It is the first line of the description. Before we even talk about the show, it's a link to the article. So once you're done watching this, check out that article. Please welcome, coming all the way live from a secret bunker somewhere in Europe, living her fancy jet set life, Ashley Frawley.
You know, if I was so fancy living a jet set life, I should have a tan, because when I look at myself, as I get older, I look more and more Morticia Adams, and I was like, oh no, why did I wear black?
You know why? Because the darkness calls you. That's why. The darkness calls you. It's okay. You have to have a calling card, right? And we all know that every time you're on this show, everyone's soundtrack to 2006 is playing in their mind, because every time you're on, that's what's on my mind, is you with the white belt and the emo outfit. So it's who you are. It's okay. You're in a safe place here. I enjoyed that music too. All right. We'll all go to a My Chemical Romance concert. It's fine. You're in your safe place.
What's funny is that back when I was an emo kid, I was actually blonde. So I've done this whole damn thing in reverse.
So you were one of those, huh? I'm just gonna.
I was.
Let's define woke in its current state. So when I was a lad many moons ago, woke meant keep an eye open to the treachery of white men. That's what woke meant. Somewhere along the lines, woke got turned into everything liberals do that I don't like. For you, not growing up as a black man in Richmond, California, what does woke mean? And did you have your own definition of it growing up where you're from in Canada?
Well, I did my undergraduate degree in anthropology and sociology, and I graduated my undergraduate in 2007. And I definitely, when I finished that degree, I was what is now called woke. Ultra woke for sure. And it's interesting because I always think of my own journey in terms of education and writing and as a researcher and as a thinker. Um, I always think of it as like a sort of coming home, that I didn't come from like a ultra privileged background. Came from, my dad is indigenous and went through some really hard times. And I when I was a younger teenager, I had kind of longed for very basic material things, not even basic, like I wanted nice things. Like I would go over to my friends' houses, and I remember like my friend's mother had the walls painted in the kitchen yellow. And
Mhm.
I just remember being like, wow, one day I'm gonna have a house with painted walls. Like, that you're just gonna like put stuff on the walls for fun. That sounds nice. Or like
Mhm.
I'm gonna have a house with carpets, this sort of thing. And then I went off to university, and it was like my education was this sort of like beating this out of me, that this was consumerism, this was bad, this was kind of false consciousness and all this like garbled Marxism. And also I learned about, cultural relativism, and social construction. And I'm still a social constructionist as a sociologist. That's the area in which I work. But I am a contextual constructionist, and I think there was this sort of extreme social constructionism that while within academia was not really taken seriously, kind of ran. And in the sort of cultural sphere, this extreme relativism and extreme kind of misunderstood constructionism, it always reminded me of like really bad first year student essays. The way that social constructionism was talked about, it would be like, oh, gender is a social construct, and therefore the thing that I want it to be is not a social construct, which is what we call ontological gerrymandering. Like you can't do that sort of bracketing. um or like I suppose you can, but you have to do it sort of consciously and recognize that what you are doing is putting forward an alternative construction, and that you are arguing that this would be a better way for us to live together, or this sheds light on a situation in an important way. But in the kind of cultural sphere, it became this the extremes of it kind of ran, and it reminded me a little bit of the 90s with, with the first time that kind of political correctness became a big deal, and extreme relativism in academia became a big deal. And you had like the so-called hoax, where they submitted a totally garbled nonsense paper using a bunch of postmodern buzzwords and got it published.
Mhm.
And it was the exact same thing that happened with James Lindsay and the kind of hoax papers that they put out, where it's like something gets to an extreme point and these people just like, oh, right, let's talk about rape culture in the dog park then and see if that gets published. And sure enough, it does, because it gets to a point where it's beyond parody. So wokeness came to be associated with this kind of extreme relativism, social constructionism, a proliferation of identities ostensibly based on sort of rendering certain identities social constructs. So like man, woman, these are social constructs. Ergo, well, there could be millions of, there could be an endless ways of being a gender, enacting gender, or whatever, that gradually kind of became reified themselves. But anyways, it came to be this sort of stand-in for this proliferation of identities, and um, uh, the language of microaggressions and triggers and extreme vulnerability. And all of this came to be associated with wokeness. Now, when I said that I kind of came out of university woke, I meant that I was very much in that kind of constructionist milieu. I had a certain amount of backward looking, because you get, especially as like an indigenous person, I kind of embarrassed saying that because I'm pale as a ghost, but
A little bit.
I got a card.
Do you really? Do you have your you get your card?
Oh, of course, it was status. Yeah.
Oh, look
Um,
at you.
yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't grow up on reserve. I spent a lot of time on reserve, and my brother lives on, some of my family lives on reserve, but I did not deal with like the worst of what that actually can mean for people.
Yeah.
But it becomes this kind of identity that it opens doors for you. And you got a lot of people that would fawn at you and be like, "Oh, your culture's so beautiful, and I'm so sorry that it's lost," and da da da. And at first, I was like, "Yeah, we lost something here in Western society," and I was very much, felt myself drawn toward this kind of third worldism, or this bigging up of the other as like the real place where the potential for progress was lost. That's kind of what I mean by like that I was very woke. And when I, ironically, for what people think woke is, when I became a Marxist, that's when I really had to question all of that and question that sort of backward looking romanticism that I had imbibed. And over time I began to realize that underneath that kind of fawning, "Oh, your culture's so beautiful," was actually an insult. That there was a darkness hidden in that apparent um, compliment, which was, everything good about you is in the past, and you're not really an equal with me. You don't really belong in this world, and you are a victim of these things that happened in the past, and they describe and define all the problems of Indigenous people. And I wrote a paper about this. We've talked about it before on this podcast, about Indigenous parenting and the way that Indigenous parents are scapegoated for the problems of Indigenous people. And it's all done through this woke language. But it repeats all of the worst things of colonialism, ironically, basically saying like, well, why can't they create these good liberal subjects? Oh, because the Indigenous parent doesn't have the skills to do so. Yep. Now it's like, oh, why can't they create this good liberal subject? And it's like, oh, because of the horrors of colonialism and ironically liberalism, we have broken down the sacred nature of motherhood and blah, blah, blah. And anyways, hidden behind this was a lot of this this kind of darkness. So for me, what woke was a kind of relativism, social construction. Then it exploded and became an obsession with vulnerability, microaggression, proliferation of identities, and like micro insults as a way of kind of gaining access to social prestige, I think. And I think it always, at least what it became, it had this kernel of darkness within it, which was a kind of nihilistic, backward looking desire to simply stop. And as a Marxist, you can't simply stop the world and want to get off. The only way out is through. And so I came to see it as quite backward, and as a veiled way of people just eking out or fighting out these petty grievances. You could get all sorts of positions and so on by counting up all of your little points of your oppressed identities. And I wanted nothing to do with that. So when I heard about this, so I had been quite anti-woke in that sense.
Sorry to cut you off, but does it feel
sorry.
like no? You're on here because you're a professor and you can talk for a long time. Don't ever get it twisted. But seriously, does it feel like it's justifying a certain racist belief also? And as you say, you're only good because of your past, what I think of you. I'm sure you got to get a certain amount of access because you're probably introduced as the native student. This is Ashley Frawley. That's her Anglo name, but she's native.
I never got a cool name. My brother did.
She's a native scholar, right? Did they ever say like she's a native scholar in this discipline?
Well, no, they say indigenous.
Sorry, I'm so see.
I'm allowed to say the N word.
It's because we had such a loose pre-show conversation that you guys get to see the fun Ashley. Just remember that. There is a fun Ashley that hides beneath the cold, dark exterior.
People only know the fun Ashley. I used to be quite a lot more like uptight and very worried about making sure that everything I said was, I think about it, make sure it was exactly correct until no one could understand what I was saying. And years of podcasting has beat that out of me.
But there, and I'm sure you dealt with this. I was talking with a good friend, Toure Reed, about this as well. When sometimes you are the person of color and you speak a certain way, you speak so well, then certain professors will, treat you almost like a token, and they won't truly push you the way they're supposed to push you. Were you finding that same thing too, with this kind of adoration of your ethnicity?
Well, yeah, I mean, if people could tell, but also I because I don't look native, I was also privy to a lot of quite overtly racist conversations, where people would be like, in school, oh, why can't we do XYZ because of the NATIVES? They would say that around me without. Yeah, they'd say that, or like even like the white side of my family would say stuff about Indigenous people, and then they would be like, "Oh, whoops, I'm sorry." So and it's funny because there's, I don't know, I can forgive it when it comes to my own family, and I do understand that when you are in like a precarious working class position, there's divide and conquer and all that stuff that happens, particularly with like hunting rights and stuff like that, and fishing. But I feel like there's absolutely nothing that makes you more pissed off than, I mean, obviously there's no point in me saying it. Like, obviously nothing pisses you off than racism, right? But it's like, I don't know, it's so uniquely fucking hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and it's so yeah, I mean that kind of, I've seen both, right? But I think what's almost worse, although it is really hurtful and it sucks, I prefer that overt racism, because at least you can, like, I know what I'm dealing with, right?
Yeah.
To the kind of covert racism that exists in a lot of these, I don't know, woke, we'll just use the word woke, right?
Sure.
But I feel like that kind of like progressive academic discourse is what I have in mind. But there's that kind of, there's a covert racism in that. And just to give you an example of this, I wrote about this for Compact actually, in an article once. But it was about a year or two ago, must have been. So I only vaguely remember what the subject matter is. But I remember I was doing a literature review beforehand, as you do, you just go through, see what people are saying and what's the state of the discussion. And I was reading this critical race theorist talking about inequality in education. And there's this very long sentence. And she says something like, Black people suffer from social, cognitive, and behavioral blah, blah, blah problems because of the legacy of slavery and da da da. And this is the reason why there's all these problems in what was it? Impairments. That was the word that she used. Impairments. The legacy of slavery. And it was this long sentence, and you're just like, okay, nodding along, and then you go, wait a minute. Did you just say Black people are cognitively impaired? And that explains educational underattainment, that Black people are cognitively impaired. That was literally the argument that was made. And that was the exact same argument that was made by, Herrnstein and Murray in the bell curve. Like, oh, I'm just going to call a spade a spade. Like, Black people have lower IQs, and it was like, oh yeah, they do. But because of racism, instead, it was just like the weakest.
But do those people, let me ask you this. Do those people get to be, and maybe they were trying to prime you to be this person, a spokesman? And I think this does play into wokeness discourse, because I agree with you. It has been taken over by the academy. It's no longer kind of inner city talk about, keep an eye open for the treacherous devils. And it becomes a way for a person like yourself, right? I'm native and I can speak nativese, and I can tell you why these people have these deficiencies with big words that will justify their treatment. You holding them back in schools. One of the worst stories I ever heard when I was in North Dakota staying with a Native family on tour was when a buddy told us when he was in school, he was younger. This was in the 90s. his mom went and asked for a tutor, and the principal said, "We don't tutor Native children because their brains work differently."
Yeah.
In the 90s in North Dakota, and this is not on a res. They did not live on a res.
Okay. Can I tell you something that's even worse than that?
God.
And it's when I read this, my
Mm.
jaw hit the floor. So, you know that I've been doing a lot of research on assisted dying in
Yes.
Canada. Well, somebody went into one of the meetings of this advocacy group for assisted dying, who are actually the professional body that represents the MAID providers, the assisted dying providers in Canada, and secretly recorded the meeting and published what was said. And one of the things that they said was, "Oh, we want to make sure that we expand access to deprived communities. We make sure that deprived communities have access to euthanasia. And we really want to make sure that we get access to Indigenous children who are able to consent because they're closer to the ancestors."
Whoa.
So they really want to euthanize Indigenous children, but don't worry, it's because they want to further access and recognize their spiritual connection to the ancestors. It's like, I'm not sure that you can get any more messed up than that.
Fuck.
Yeah.
But that for me is kind of how woke discourse functions in the current sense. And I think you and most of the people affiliated with this show are not fans of that kind of discourse because it becomes ventriloquism at a certain point for people. You know, Kindy has made a living off of it. I've never seen a man fail up like that before. He's got another professorship at Howard, I believe, after stealing all that money for his anti-racism department or clinic or whatever. I can't remember off the top of my head. So we kind of established what woke is.
I wanted to just
I'm
say, because
sorry.
you had
Sure.
mentioned earlier, you said, is it about justifying racist beliefs?
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, we've given a lot of examples of that, but I think it's important just to say like a very basic thing, like the noble savage was a racist trope,
Mhm.
even though it appeared to be saying something nice about Native people. Because it was essentialist, because you are denying the fullness of the humanity of the person that you're talking about. So like another one, just in terms of gender, like women are wonderful, this trope of like women are wonderful, or like even outside of gender, like parenting is the hardest job in the world, and all of this masks an injunction.
Mm.
It's like women must be wonderful, parenting must be the hardest job in the world, and if it's not, if you're lazy, well, fuck you, basically, right?
Mhm.
Like and so women are wonderful. Women are empathetic. So you've all this like corporate wokeness that talks about how we need to hire more women because women will be more empathetic. Women are closer to nature. They're closer to their emotions. And they're saying all this incredibly insulting stuff that generations of feminists have fought against, have said please do not essentialize me because I'm a woman. Because these were things that kept women out of the public sphere, which was you are closer to nature, you are closer to emotion, therefore you are not suitable to be in positions of power. You can't have the nuclear codes because what about if you're on your period? The men will say, and the more sophisticated forms of it was all essentializing femininity and it was highly insulting. But then you put it in this sort of like women are wonderful thing. Oh, actually, ladies, that's a really good thing that you're empathetic. It's great you're closer to nature. It's wonderful that you're going to care for the environment more. Women are more, women will have better policies, blah, 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 which was essentializing and denying the fullness of humanity to women, and also a subtle way of punishing women who were not that. So like the most obvious example of this is the turf slur, right? So women are wonderful. You're supposed to be accommodating. You're supposed to be kind. You're supposed to be nice. And if
Mhm.
you're not, you will get the absolute wrath of society rain down on you. And that's what happened. And I've seen like so many times in these arguments between, gender critical feminists online and trans activists that they would say, I thought you were supposed to be nice. They would say that outright. And it
Mhm.
was like, I'm going to punish you because you're not nice. Now, I'm not taking necessarily sides in that. I do think like there's a lot of hysteria. I've done this twice now. I said
You
spade
say
is
hysteria. See, that is the most anti-woke thing you can say. Now I got to get all the feminists yelling at me. Ashley, thanks a lot.
But anyway, so it masked an injunction that you must be like that. So that was like the common argument that people would make against the whole diversity thing, was that you would have diversity of appearance, but a demand of absolute adherence to a single ideology. So it denies the fact that if you had held different ideas, that you were really, I mean, this happened in the UK too. Like, people call politicians fake Black people because they weren't liberal.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean liberal in the American sense of liberal, like they weren't left wing.
Yeah.
And so it masked this kind of this subtle racism. It was highly racist because it was very, very essentialist about how you should be, and denied the full range of humanity to people who happen to have particular skin colors or sexual orientations or whatever it might be.
So now that we got that out of the way, seriously, so there has been this weird shift. And I wrote about this in the Crisis Papers. If you'd like to read it, there's a link in the description, the Crisis Papers. But there has been this shift to say, let's be meaner liberals, right? And this is kind of what you're talking about. And this is the dark woke, because I guess we're going to use the term dark woke because it comes off the Dark Brandon meme, where Joe Biden really wasn't in a cognitive decline with dementia. He's based, as the young people say. And that was the Dark Brandon meme for a while. And this feels like some sort of tentacle off of that, where we just need a left-wing Joe Rogan. And I still don't know what that means, because I think Joe Rogan is emblematic of the average American. A person that says they're conservative probably has some liberal beliefs, and they're not strictly physical conservatives that believe in this and cutting taxes for that. And people are complex, especially with their political understandings of the world. I mean, ask the average American how many branches of government are there, and I'm sure they can't answer that question. And I don't think that's so much of an indictment on Americans. It's just a lot of people just don't care. It doesn't affect them the way they think it does. So the idea of a quote unquote left-wing Joe Rogan, I've always thought to myself, well, that person has existed forever. Bill Maher's been around forever. To me, he's been the liberal, a more liberal version that now is kind of, I don't know if he's devolving or evolving into whatever he is now, but what is, for you, what is this dark woke thing?
Okay, so I don't want to make too much of it because it's essentially like an internet meme, right? So I mean, how anybody who's written about it tends to kind of it's like a month old. So it goes back to a kind of tiff between the Libs of TikTok creator Kaya Rajcik and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, where Ocasio-Cortez put out a TikTok video, because apparently that's how our political discourse rolls now. But she put out a TikTok video basically saying, I'm not going to any of the inauguration activities because I don't want to celebrate a rapist. Or I don't celebrate rapists, is what she said. And the Libs of TikTok creator, quotes this on X and goes, oh, Donald Trump, this is the next person you should sue. And then Ocasio-Cortez, or OAC, we'll call her, writes back, oh, are you triggered? Cry more. Which I thought was a fantastic response. I mean, it could have been a great response, because I think it could have been calling out this kind of hypocritical censoriousness of the right that's come up now, which I think we have to be very careful about. And it might have shown the door to almost a decade of this kind of victim mongering, proliferation of all these like triggers and microaggressions that we'd so earnestly had as part of our leftist vocabulary. And just sort of like, are you triggered? So it's basically saying like, yeah, all of that was bullshit. But of course, it was not read as this sort of like, okay, we realized the last decade was this weird fever dream. The left needs to be the libertines as we had been. and refound its championing of freedom. Now, I'm obviously reading too much into an X post, but symbolic of this kind of like, we need to like refound our libertine nature and refound and champion freedom to win the hearts and minds of the electorate. So it's like, right-wing populism has now taken power. Left-wing populism needs to find itself in a post. Oh no. This was not the lesson that was learned. It was like, so one X post was like, I think the dark woke stuff had to happen eventually because the liberal side of the culture war hadn't been. Are you freaking kidding me? Are you kidding me? I know, I'm sorry for the cliches, but imagine thinking that the problem with wokeness was that it was too nice. It was too nice. Hounding people out of public life should they say the wrong thing. We were too nice. Like, I remember like one of my very first viral videos that I posted. I was in an interview with Sky News or something, and I was like desperately trying to put the Communist Manifesto in a way that's not going to get me kicked off live TV. And I think I did a pretty damn good job popularizing Marxism. Oh my God, you have never heard vitriol from anybody before. Like, you got vitriol from people with anime avatars and they, them in their bio and hashtag be kind. It was like, fire this lumpen.
Oh.
Well, yeah, because we all know that Marx was like, workers of the world unite, except if they've got dodgy ideas and do not quite exactly fit to sectarian debates. By the way, I won those sectarian debates. You can see if you go back to those videos, you can see many an evening I sat there. I was like, all right. And I was just owning edgy teenagers on the internet.
Yeah, and that's when your dude has to come up to you and be like, honey, just please. I'm gonna need
I know that I had children in the background, like,
yeah.
It was
he's like, I'm gonna need you. Look, I'm gonna need you to be a kind woman. I need you to be a good mother right now. I need you to be a kind, good mother right now. I need the stereotype.
Exactly. So there was it was never dark. So when I first heard, it was never kind. It was never light. There was no bright woke. There was no enlightenment woke. In fact, there was some very interesting anti-enlightenment. Well, there is a huge amount of anti-enlightenment just on the left generally, but there's a humongous amount of very interesting anti-enlightenment within wokeness. But anyway, my first thought when I hear about this whole thing, like dark woke, so there's this jumping off points like, oh yeah, now we're going to do dark woke. We're going to be mean. I was like, what's going to change? Like, are you just going to go full, mask off, go full on blood and soil? Maybe start advocating like returning America to its ancestral bloodline. Yep, literally.
Yeah.
That was one of the edgy tweets was like, one of the edgy tweets was, let me pull it up here. Deport everyone until only the Native Americans are left, says one supporter of dark woke.
Wow.
So, I mean, obviously it's all for the lulz, and they're kind of trying to emulate the darkness of the right when it was first coming up, right? It was all just for jokes. But here's the thing. Irony on the right was their way of let me find a better way. Like trickle truthing is a good way to put it that people understand. Trickle truthing. Like Donald Trump does this, right? So he jokes. It's like if you've ever been in an abusive relationship, your partner will be like, oh, your teeth are really fucked up. I'm just joking.
Damn. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I've luckily never been in such a relationship, thank God. But I know from like my friends where I'm like, without telling me what their boyfriend's saying, I'm like, oh my God, he's testing the waters, obviously.
Damn, your teeth are so fucked.
I don't know. I think they probably try to say it in a funny way. But anyways, Donald Trump will do that. He'll be like, ha ha ha, you would make a great congressman, or not congressman, you'd make a great governor of a 51st state, Justin Trudeau. And he's joking, right? But he's kind of like an abusive boyfriend where he's joking, but he's not joking. Like he's like, what would they say if I said this? And he's kind of like joking about Greenland, but is he joking? So that's kind of how the right used to kind of do these things. So they would say what they really thought, but like they're joking. So a lot of the things that have come out with the dark woke hashtag are things that points that people have made earnestly. So it's like, oh, what did you think decolonization meant? Papers, vibes, like decolonization, we mean it's not a metaphor. But of course, if you call it out and say, oh, well, this is blood and soil nationalism, they'll be like, decolonization is just a metaphor. Um, and so there was always this kind of I think this dark core within wokeness. But the thing that's interesting that you said at the very beginning, you said that people are warning, well, if you're going to go dark, then you are going to just mirror the tactics of the right, which is true. That's what they're doing. But then you're giving up on the principles of progressivism, which is inclusivity and empathy. And I think that's your problem right there. So that was my thinking too. I was like, okay, well, if you're going to give up your inclusivity and your empathy, then what do you have? Because you don't have any other principles. All that we had, and it was symptomatic of the collapse of the left and the right, was that the left had become about being nice or seeming nice, and the right had been about being as mean as possible. Ooh, like that's the wonderful depth of our political debate. But if you get rid of that niceness, what the fuck is left? Naked racism? Well, yeah, to a certain extent. That's like one of the tweets that I pulled up in the article was like, if somebody calls you a slur, you call them a slur right back. And I was like, great. That's
that's
and what's missing is this soul searching for the fact that we have lost our principles. That there isn't any, like, I'm basically mad at the left for not being Marxist. I mean, that's obviously been my shtick for like a decade, as long as I have been a Marxist, because there's a reason why Marx was critical, oftentimes more critical of socialists and communists than he was of ostensible adversaries like the liberal political economists like Adam Smith. He was often quite celebratory of people like that, because it really matters that we have principles that guide our movement. It really matters that we have an understanding of why things go wrong. And instead, we have fallen into this melodrama of victims and villains. And it's like, okay, now we will also be villains.
But isn't that the simplicity of the way a lot of people understand the world?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this is a justification for what you're saying. I'm just saying it feels to me like the victims and villains understanding is how people understand the political world. Either Donald Trump is a bad guy or he's your anti-hero, but he's always a bad guy. Whenever there's a meme of him that somebody drew a painting of him like looking like some Greek guy, like that's a joke, and no one's taking that seriously. He's everyone's favorite bad guy. There's a reason why people like mafia movies where there's really no hero, right? No one watches a mafia movie and thinks, oh wow, the victims of this movie are literally the people in the neighborhood, because they're the ones that suffer. They're the ones that have to pay weekly or monthly to these people just because, they're the ones that get beat up if they don't. But they're never shown as heroes or victims. They're just kind of, if anything, collateral damage in this portrayal of cool. You see the same thing in films about stock scams. It always feels like, well, maybe if that guy wasn't so greedy, just a little less greedy, then it wouldn't have been so bad. And you never really see, again, the damage that is caused from financial deregulation and mergers and acquisitions, something we say so casually, but it does have a real life cost. I'll say this again. The man that wrote the movie Pretty Woman, do you remember the movie Pretty Woman? Ashley, from the 90s? I think 1990. That original script he wrote while he was trying to figure stuff out. And he was writing scripts in all-night donut shops in Los Angeles. And he was meeting sex workers. And he would talk to them. And he was finding that most of them were coming from the Midwest because the factory had shut down due to mergers and acquisitions. So Richard Gere's character in the original script is a horrible man, more like Gordon Gekko. And it's a very, very sad story that Touchstone and Disney kind of niced up. And it became a huge hit movie. But you've ever heard the actual writer's still alive and actually talks about the original script. But it's a
wasn't it called 1,000 or something, or
$3,000? Yeah, because that was the whole thing. It's a weekend.
Yeah.
They would tell him, oh, the big lick is when you get a guy that takes you to Vegas for the weekend, and that's when you make the real money. So there's a real human cost that we've ignored for so long. So we can kind of glorify this villain. And I can understand why I think the pivot for most of these liberals is, let's just be like them, and then we can have that same kind of popularity as well. But we'll be like them, maybe a little nicer, or we'll aim our racist anger in the proper way, which I've never really understood.
In the proper way, yeah. Yeah, so the thing is that I hesitate to really call I mean, I use the word liberal because this is how Americans use this word. But when I talk about liberal, I often mean classical liberal. And if you think about it in that sense, these people are anything but liberal, or nor do they belong in that legacy, in that kind of liberal legacy. Although obviously that's quite controversial and subject to, I recognize, can be subject to some critique. But I think nonetheless, a lot of the arguments that are made sit more comfortably on the right. A lot of the arguments that were that came to be associated with the left and wokeness sit more comfortably on what had been the right since the, in the legacy of the French Revolution. And the internet connection. Okay, have you still got me?
Yeah, I got you.
Oh no,
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, I just my screen went black for a second. So they become obsessed with particularity, with like the folk, and I always found it very interesting that there was this a lot of people stopped using the word people and started saying folks, and it was the implication of the word folk was like a particular, that there was like black folks, white folks, you folks, LGBT folks. It was always this word that associated with particular groups, which seemed to me to hark back to figures like Herder and this sense of like a unique kind of spirit of the people, which was, although Herder saw himself as on the left, is a very, within the liberal tradition, is a very right-wing thing. And on the kindly right talked about like the unique spirit of the people, the sort of cultural diversity and so on. And they worried that capitalism was destroying that. Remember that like the left were the people who wanted to push the revolution further, wanted to go further. So you had like liberals who were sort of like the holders of the revolution's values, and then you had the socialists and communists who thought you needed another revolution. But on the conservative side, they worried that the revolution was destroying something very wonderful in particular about the people. And then later on, the far right version of that biologized the unique spirit of the people to be something very literal and to be like great races of mankind, some of which were better than others, and so on and so on. So there was always that obsession with particularity that overtook the left. Was very, very right wing and anti-liberal, and obviously anti-enlightenment and tended not to have that same kind of progressive force that I think Marx saw or had in terms of seeing a sort of continuity. There was more of like a stop, we've gone too far aspect to it. But in terms of this sort of victims and villains narrative, I think that is very romantic, very melodramatic, very emotional kind of framing of things, as opposed to a kind of a more reason-based understanding of what is actually going on within systems. Because the thing that I love, and I say this all the time, if you know who I am, you will have heard me say this a million times, but the great thing about Marxism is that it doesn't rely on greed. It doesn't rely on human error. It doesn't need to degrade humanity in any way to understand why things go wrong in capitalism. It takes the exact same subject as the liberal political economist, the rational subject. And it shows, and Marx shows how things will still go wrong, even by people doing what is reasonable. And in fact, especially by people doing what is reasonable within the logic of the system. It is reasonable to, capitalism works best in the form of many small capitals, but it is rational to, the rational behavior of people leads to monopoly. And this was like a puzzle within classical political economy. And then it just became denied and gets blamed on human behavior. I think the left just went all in on that. So with these bad people and
Mhm.
greed and and then became obsessed with behavior management, and if only we could teach people the right ways to think, feel, and behave, and lost that kind of structural understanding of why things went wrong. And I think we have not refound that. I think what actually happened is that the entire left collapsed, the left that once included liberalism, socialism, and communism. And what we have are a kindly version of the right and a mean version of the right. And I think the kindly version of the right is just being like, maybe we should be more like the mean version of the right. But they're not wondering what principles have been lost. They're not, nobody is looking to that collapsed side of the spectrum saying perhaps there's something there in that rubble that we can pick up and start and use to build some kind of pathway to the future. And I think that is a major kind of issue. And the point that I end the article in Compact, the dark woke article on, is I say woke was always dark. What we are hearing now is its death rattle, and it's probably good that it sounds like a chuckle because it's all just jokes, you know.
I do. I
If
do
the
think.
tragedy of what they'll keep for decades should end in a meme, humanity can at least laugh at itself as it's left behind. Sorry?
No, no, no. I'm sorry because it looks like you're having a little. On my end, there's some internet issues from you, but I can still hear you. Um, I I feel like woke
Oh,
is
yeah, because I'm
over.
in Greece and that's where my
Yeah.
bunker is.
Well, when you're out there on the Riviera, it's just all beautiful. What was that movie that they filmed out there? Talented Mr. Ripley. Oh, it's just beautifully shot film. That's
Oh,
where
I
you're
was
living.
thinking of Mamma Mia, which was filmed just
Mamma
over
Mia!
there, just in the next island.
Um, it does feel like woke is over. I do you think this incoming Trump administration with Elon Musk have killed woke?
Yeah, I think so. And I said, I mean, there like obviously people are trying to pick up the pieces because they have lost their principles and their bearings. But the line that I ended the article with is an allusion to I think it's Marx's critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, where he says it's a continuation of the line, or it's an allusion to the line in the 18th Brumaire, the famous line, "History repeats itself, but first is tragedy, then is farce." And he in the critique of Hegel's philosophy of right, he talks about, why is it that in tragedy, or sorry, in Greek drama generally, the gods don't die in tragedies, they die in comedies. And he says it's so that humanity can laugh at itself as it leaves its past behind. So we like our great kind of heroes, they die in comedy. And
Mhm.
so since, wokeness seems to be dying in this comedy, perhaps it's us laughing at ourselves as we leave the past behind. I very much hope so. But what I am worried about is that woke lost, but did freedom really win?
No.
Is there anybody who sincerely believes in freedom now? Like, I mean, there are a few different reasons for it, but Musk, for instance, has put a stop to a bunch of legislation under this big umbrella. But one of the things was the debanking, like
Yes.
anti-debanking legislation.
Yeah.
And nobody noticed that. Like that was a big deal that the dissident right was against. And they're just as happy to like defund and it's as much as I want to revel in the Schadenfreude, as much as I want to be like good riddance to all this nonsense of the sort of NGO complex, it is deeply worrying to use the exact same tactics. I mean, I said this was going to happen. I did say, I was like, you got to just stop canceling people because as soon as they take power, they will fuck you. Like that is exactly what is going to happen. You can't just sort of cancel people out of existence. Like we have to have the final battle against the final boss. Like you gotta win. And you have to have something that is gonna win. What do we have? What
Mhm.
do we have? And are we going to win against surveillance? Are we going to fly the flag of freedom? Do we believe that human beings are capable of having that, of having freedom, of using reason to make a better world, to we've got like this like AI race between DeepSeek and ChatGPT and so on, which has enormous potential to minimize the amount of labor time that we're spending. But we're stuck in this world of monopoly, and so they're all like, "No, I own it. No, you own it. No, you stole it from me." Even though it's all of our data is stolen, which could be great because the more it subsumes of our history, the more it's able to help us and plan and da da da. But we're kind of stuck in this world, and we're not thinking through that. We're not thinking through that on our way to a contradiction, on our way through a contradiction to the future. Most of us don't believe in the future anymore. There's an enormous amount of like nihilism, and I think this is the opportunity and the imperative now to do that.
Well, I want to ask you this one last thing before we go. I know I've kept you for a while, and it's a little later where you are, so I want to thank you again for taking the time.
No, my dog keeps going in and out of my office, which is why I keep shutting it, closing and opening the door, because otherwise he just barks. Sorry.
Did you get the dog in Greece, or you brought it from over there?
Oh, he's very old. His name is Mark, so you can tell that I named him about 11 years ago, and I was quite keen. And did not think about the fact that many times on live TV or radio or podcasting, I will be like, "Marks, shush."
It's the new way of the two-screen world. It's fine. There's so many interruptions that I think people are accustomed to. It keeps things real. Last question for you before you go, and also wherever you guys are watching or listening to the show, there's links in the description to Ashley's article in Compact Magazine. Is it called What is Dark Woke?
The Rise of Dark Woke.
I'm sorry. The Rise of Dark Woke. I apologize. I failed you. How can liberals balance the need for assertiveness in political debates with the risk of alienating potential allies through this aggressive rhetoric?
I mean, who are you really going to alienate? Who are you really going to alienate by being real?
Your donors.
And I think, I mean, that's true. But I do think, like, what does somebody like Donald Trump speak to? An exhaustion with the era of politics that was about slick PR. Everybody knew politicians were lying. Everybody knew. But as long as they said it through the slickest language possible, through language that had been workshopped to oblivion to the point where it didn't say anything at all anymore, you could pretty much get away with whatever you wanted. But people caught on to that. And we're sick and tired of having leaders who never really said anything, who never really seemed to do anything, that there didn't seem to be a real choice between political parties. It was just the same kind of people that did the same sorts of things, but kind of framed their what they wanted to do in a Republican-ish way or a Democrat-ish way. And that was it. And so that kind of like tell it like it is rhetoric, silly though it was, spoke to an exhaustion with that. And so I think, somebody like, there are a bunch of labor leaders in the UK that are like this, and I love them, and people really like them. Who are, salt of the earth sorts of people that are able to fight for everyday people and speak that language, and they're not afraid to offend, and they just say what people are thinking. The trouble, I think, I guess, with these kinds of leaders and why they've not really taken positions that could realistically get them into power is that we've long had a problem with sectarianism on the left. There's an old joke that people say, well, not old because it's kind of a new phenomenon, but the right thinks everybody is their friend. Like if you go to, any kind of event, the right thinks everybody's like, you're my new friend. And but the left thinks everyone's a potential enemy.
Yeah.
And so they're always looking at each other, always afraid of what they're going to say.
You're
just fucking backstabbing each other constantly.
Yeah. That's so true. Which is funny because it's like you must live in a world of the internet.
Yeah, so
how do you build
that's kind of an issue.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Ashley, can you hear me?
Yeah,
no.
sorry. Yeah.
Oh.
So how do you I think there's like a 10-second delay, but I'll just say like so how do you get beyond that? I think it is really, really tricky, but we do have to kind of let go of a lot of our politics, which was presented itself as politics, but was actually social climbing. And kind of have a camaraderie outlook.
Yeah.
And after we rob some banks and we get the army on our side, yeah, maybe we can ice pick each other. But when we're not there yet and we're very far from that ever being on the horizon, let's just be comrades and tell it like it is and try our best to speak for the great mass of humanity that wants a better life.
There you go, Ashley Frawley from the Symbionese Liberation Army. Robin Banks with Patty Hearst. If you didn't know, she's
now
eighth
Musk
grade.
is going to come and I'll be in handcuffs.
Thank you, Ashley, again for taking the time to talk to me. Wherever you're listening or watching to the show, there's a link in the description to Ashley's piece in Compact Magazine, where she is indeed the editor. The editor of Compact.
Wow.
Ashley.
Senior, among others.
I was trying to talk you up. Don't fuck this up, okay? Don't fuck this up. Just nod. Smile and nod. Seriously, thank you. And thank you guys for hanging out. If you guys want to see more of these early Monday streams with Ashley and her apparently third world internet, let me know in the comments. We can do more of these. This is fun. I actually enjoy talking to you. You encourage me. I wrote a lot from our last discussion. I wrote this whole fucking long ass piece about euthanasia and where I think things are going with that. So, thank you very
brilliant.
much.
I'm glad.
Thank
you. Thank you so much.
And I'll see you guys tomorrow evening, normal time. And we are out.